Hello and welcome to India Tonight and a special interview with the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Mr. Blair, let's start with the riots that happened less than 2 months ago in Britain and which really shocked the world. Today, do you have a clearer idea of what caused them?
I actually think we have a pretty clear idea of what caused them at the time and now. And you know, it's always difficult when you see these pictures on the news. They're very dramatic. They make a huge impact on people. It's really important to realize this was a very small number of people. I think the police were caught a little bit off guard to begin with, and also were worried as to how they should respond. But once they started to respond, they closed it down within a few days. And you know, there were far more people that came to clean up after the rioters than there were people rioting.
But what caused it?
I think there's multiple causes. I mean, I think two in particular. The first is a section of society, small in number, but usually from very dysfunctional family backgrounds, who in our inner cities, and this is true of all Western developed countries, become a kind of subgroup of society, if you like. And I think I came to the conclusion then in my 10 years as Prime Minister we needed very, very special measures to deal with such people. I think there's one cause, and the other cause, frankly, was criminality. People could see an opportunity to go and loot, and they did.
Were you horrified by the fact that many of the people looting were actually teenagers? One of them was as young as 11 years old.
Well, I think if you get a situation of total disorder, then all sorts of people, particularly young people, do stupid things. But I think it's really important for people from the outside to realize this is not typical of Britain. You know, Britain, for all its challenges, as we all have in the Western economies at the moment, is a society that actually believes in order and stability and so on. So I would, you know, from the outside, I think a lot of my friends from outside of Britain have been saying to me, my God, what's been going on in your country? Actually, I think this was reasonably explicable in terms of its causes, and shut down now, and the longer social problem you've got to deal with, which is this subgroup of people, that I think is a real policy question for all governments, actually, Western governments. But
focusing for a moment on that subgroup, the dysfunctional families that you spoke about, is this a reflection of a collapse of moral and family values, as some sections of British society speculate, or is it a reflection of deprivation, enhanced perhaps by government cuts?
First of all, I think to dignify this by saying it was some grand social protest when people are smashing shop windows and carrying away TV sets, I think we've got to be careful of that. Secondly, you see, my view of this is that it isn't a sign of a general moral decay. I mean, most young people that I meet in Britain are law-abiding, responsible, hard-working. Actually, if I'm honest about it, you know, growing up in the 60s and 70s, a lot more responsible and hard-working than my generation was. I think this is a small number of people who, for various reasons in our societies, and I think largely to do with their family makeup, of course linked to issues of deprivation, but it's really this concept of families which almost from generation to generation have no real stability. I mean, the parents are often on drugs, or they've got alcohol problems, or you know, the mother may be in prostitution and so on. You know, it's a small number of families, but they cause an immense amount of damage in local communities. And as I say, in the last 2 years before I stopped being Prime Minister, we developed programs that were very much about targeting those families, actually putting them in a controlled environment, and if necessary prepared to take the children out of that environment.
Is there an ethnic or racial connection that unites these small families, or do they occur across the social population framework?
I think it's across the population framework. I mean, in certain areas you get pockets of problems that might be identifiable with one or other group of people, but on the whole, I think no. This is actually about a group of people that society has kind of left behind, and what we've got to do to recover the situation is realize that they're not typical. You know, this is not a general social decline. This is not a general moral decay. It's a very specific decline of a particular section, and we've been living with this now for 25, 30 years, I think, more.
The interesting thing is that Britain periodically, if you look back on its history, both the recent history and the past, has actually had riots. You've had them in the 90s, you've had them in the 80s, you had them in the 20th century and the 19th century. Why is Britain prone to periodic rioting?
I never really looked at it like that, Karan. I guess probably most societies have had this in one form or another, I think. If you look at the United States, for example, periodically. And they're very different. I mean, there was obviously, back in the 80s, there was a racial component in the rioting. Back in the early parts of the 20th century, I think they were very much to do with poverty and deprivation. So, you know, on the whole, you know, we're a pretty, as you know, we're a pretty law-abiding society. So.
Now, the other big event that happened this summer in Britain, which again attracted worldwide attention, was the news of the world phone scandal. What do you believe, looking back on that episode, are the important lessons Britain, for one, needs to learn?
Well, I think there are two big lessons, and we're in danger of learning one and forgetting the other, which is why I'm very have very strong views on this issue, actually, because I, you know, was at the top of British public life. Well, still am in a sort of curious way, despite my best efforts. But you know, I obviously had a huge amount to do with the media. I think there are two problems. One is a set of practices, of which phone hacking was the worst but not the only one, where frankly parts of the media just step right outside the line. Now that has to be dealt with, it's got to be shut down, the people concerned have to be dealt with, and so on. That's one problem. In a way, that's, in a sense, that's relatively easy to deal with. There is then, in my view, another issue, which is not a specifically British issue, but because of the penetration of our mass newspapers, it's an issue that is particularly acute in Britain. And that's where newspapers are used as instruments of politics, because this is what causes the problem for politicians in their interaction with the media. You know, and this is why, you know, people often say, well, you know, did I have too strong a relationship, not just with Murdoch, with other parts of the media and other prime ministers and so on? And I always say to that, look, if you're in a situation where these guys, particularly if they hunt in a pack, can literally take out your ministers and make your government rock, then you've got no option but to work hard on trying to bring them round. Now, is that healthy? No, but it's inevitable unless you deal with the root of that problem, which is where you get the line between news and commentary blurred, and you get newspapers using newspaper stories as opposed to comment really to get across a particular point of view.
This second point is one that David Cameron made fairly frequently and fairly effectively in the wake of the scandal, and one of the things he pointed out was that there was an unfortunate, cozy, chummy, comfortable relationship between top politicians on the one hand and top editors on the other. Do you think you need now more space and perhaps even a little bit more formality between the two?
Yes, but you know, cozy, chummy and comfortable is not quite the right description. I mean, the truth is you're dealing with people who, as I say, if they decide to put one of their newspapers against you, you know, what you find is not that the comment is against you, the stories are against you. You see what I mean? And that's a very different thing. And therefore it's not, you know, my analysis of this is not so much as about a cozy relationship, it's about a relationship in which you're dealing with people who've got the capacity to do very great damage.
You know, you sound as if you're almost suggesting that sections of the press can have British governments over the barrel.
If they hunt in a pack. Look, when I was dealing with a so-called ministerial scandal, and it might be a real scandal or a not real scandal, if they decided to absolutely go for it, you know, you were reeling as a government.
In which case, it's not just the press hunting in a pack that's a potential danger. What about the fact that a man like Murdoch, even though he's closed down News of the World, still owns The Sun, he owns The Times, he owns The Sunday Times, he owns Sky B, and he owns HarperCollins. He alone, potentially, has the capacity, if he uses all his instruments together, to bring British governments down.
I mean, bring British governments down pretty too high, but have a big impact on British politics, yes. My only point is, you know, as I always say, this is because some parts of the British media want to make this just about Rupert Murdoch. You know, having dealt with all the newspaper people over the years, you know, the idea you've got this sort of wicked Murdoch here and all these lovely other people, not quite in my experience. So I think but you're right. Look, this is the issue, but it's an issue also, I think, partly to do with the way news and the media and politics interact today. And I think this is not just a British problem, incidentally. This is a modern democratic problem.
Murdoch doesn't own papers in India, but he owns a substantial television empire. Do we need to be on our guard in the light of what you've been through?
I think you need to be on your guard more generally about the relationship between media and politics. And look, here's the thing, Karan. There will always be a situation where politicians get upset with the media. And indeed, a society in which politicians aren't upset with the media is probably a society in which the media is not doing its job.
And in fact, it's right for the media to make politicians upset many times.
Well, absolutely. And you know, that relationship, it's always going to be edgy. And the idea this is something new, you know, you go back in time and you look at Churchill and Lloyd George, and you know,
which is why the chumminess, when it happens, infringes upon the natural adversarial nature of that relationship. And chummy relations mean a media that is either compromising or, worse still, politicians who are dropping their guard, or perhaps both.
It can mean that, and again, you know, that close relationship between proprietors and politicians is not something new either. What is new is this: in a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week media, where stories move very, very quickly, and in particular where the social media multiplies the effect of any story. You know, there's an intensity of stories today that I think is different from before, and they move at a great pace. When I fought my first campaign as Labour leader to win the election in 1997, you know, I would start a campaign day with one story, right? And it would run throughout the day, and it would be a rhythm that you could more or less control.
Now it may not run more than 2 hours.
Exactly. So it's a quite different, and what that means is, by the way, is it means that politicians often feel they're caught up in a sort of vortex of scandals coming at them from every angle, trying to respond when the policy debate often gets squeezed out by you know, scandal. And it's hard to describe this accurately and properly, but as a political leader today, you really, you know, how you interact with the media is now a huge part of how you perform your job.
It's something that Indian politicians are learning at their cost at the moment. You come to the country where scandal is in fact the first issue that arises in the press's mind when they look at Dr. Manmohan Singh and his government. Do you think the press needs to be not more understanding and not less critical, but more patient in giving governments time to respond to scandal so that they don't get overwhelmed and the wrong impression of inability doesn't go through?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think what it needs, actually, because you can't, you know, I'm totally against sort of trying to regulate a free press. I don't think that's a good idea at all. But it needs, if you like, some measure of understanding of where the other's coming from. And the reason why this is so important is that otherwise you do find governments literally overwhelmed by scandal, so that you get to a situation where everything, including, by the way, vital decisions that are supposed to be being taken on the economy and so on, are almost become of second order, because unless you deal with the scandal, it can literally knock your government down.
This sounds exactly the problem Dr. Manmohan Singh faces today, and you're really saying, aren't you, from your own experience as Prime Minister, don't hesitate to expose scandal, the press must, but having done it, give politicians a little time to respond and be a little understanding when perhaps the response is not instantaneous. Don't assume a failure to respond instantly is tantamount to guilt.
Correct, absolutely what I'm saying, and what I'm also saying is that if you know, not every scandal, in my experience, turns out to be a real scandal. Okay, so you know, when I think of the scandals I went through as a Prime Minister, you know, some were genuine, probably equal numbers weren't, and yet, frankly, for the public, by the time, you know, you've been through 2 news cycles, I mean, you know, what were they supposed to think? So I think this is by the way, I notice this everywhere I go in the modern world. This is an issue. And the social media, which is a revolutionary phenomenon in my view. I mean, the social media, I think we're only just beginning to understand the incredible impact that has. And what it means is that before, when you used to have sort of tidal waves of opinion would build up quite slowly.
Now they do it instantaneously.
Now it's almost an instant tsunami.
The tyranny of text messages is something else Prime Ministers in office need to be wary of.
Well, fortunately, I never had a mobile phone all the time I was Prime Minister, which I literally say a prayer of thanks for.
But it's a problem David Cameron faces today, isn't it?
Well, it's a problem today. You've got email, text, and you've also got freedom of information, which I introduced and rather regretted afterwards.
Let's take a break at that point. When I come back, Mr. Blair, I want to talk to you about Pakistan, a country that obsesses India, but a country that's also very much at the top of the news agenda at the moment. All of that in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to India Tonight and a special interview with the former British Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Mr. Blair, let's talk about Pakistan, a country that's very much in the news at the moment. Both American Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and Admiral Mullen have expressed strong concern about the ISI's involvement with terror. In fact, Admiral Mullen has said that the Haqqani group of terrorists are a veritable arm of the ISI. Do you share that view of the ISI?
I'm actually not qualified to talk about the ISI and Haqqani or support of terrorist groups, but I think in general terms, let me say this, and I say this, you know, with all due deference to Pakistan, to the government of Pakistan, because I know that there are many people in Pakistan who are trying to do the right thing, want to do the right thing. Pakistan itself has suffered enormously from terrorism, from extremism. You know, tens of thousands of people have died. But there is a struggle, I think, going on within the country between what I would call those with a modern and you know, open-minded attitude to the future, and those in whatever part of the system they are who you know, regard this as a power struggle and will play around accordingly, but in a very dangerous way.
Now, the real issue at the moment, and I'm concentrating first on the Haqqanis, I'll come to the ISI a little later, the real issue is what Pakistan does or doesn't do to take out the Haqqani group. If Pakistan fails to act, and all the indications are that it's not going to act, would you support the Americans stepping in to eliminate the Haqqanis on their own?
Well, it's a very difficult question for me to answer. And I think, you know, the US are going to have to make their own decisions about that in the light of their relationship with the Pakistani government. But the trouble is with these groups is that there is no way of using them wisely. You know, there is no way that you can put them into a power play. Let's say it's underneath this issue that Pakistan has as to what influence do they have in Afghanistan, vis influence that India might have in Afghanistan. There is nothing good that will ever come out of supporting groups like this. And so if there is, and as I say, I'm not qualified to comment in detail on it, if there is any involvement in or support of groups like Haqqani, it's a huge mistake, and it will end up in a situation where people will demand action.
I'll tell you why I asked the question, because America stepped in and took out Osama bin Laden, and it had a tremendous backlash, and it's a continuing backlash in Pakistan. Now that they believe that the Haqqanis, supported by the ISI, are carrying out terrorist attacks in Afghanistan, not just on the American embassy, but possibly on Burhanuddin Rabbani himself, the Americans must be very tempted to sort this out. Do you think it would be advisable to do it in the light of the backlash they suffered when they did it in May with Osama?
Well, as I say, I think the US will make its own calculations about that. I don't want to get into commenting on it directly, because it's really not appropriate for me, and I'm not actually personally involved in this issue anymore. But I think here's the question I have about Pakistan, and I'm not saying anything to you I don't say to my Pakistani friends. I mean, I think there is, underneath the surface, a huge struggle going on about what type of country it is, what type of society. And I think Pakistan as a whole is paying a heavy price for mistakes that were made in the 1970s, linking religion with politics, developing these religious schools that I think, in some instances at least, are very, very dangerous sources of education for extremism. And in the end, there's all over the world, there is the same struggle going on, and it is a struggle that is in part about the nature of Islam and how it develops.
Absolutely. While we're talking about Pakistan, let me come to the second issue, the ISI. Not only do the Americans believe that the ISI, through the Haqqani group, is involved in terror in Afghanistan, but India has equal proof of ISI involvement in the 26/11 attack in Mumbai. David Headley has given the Americans proof of ISI military involvement, financial involvement, training, guidance. He's even named names. Do you think the ISI today is a threat to world peace?
If they've been doing this, I mean, I don't, again, as I say, I'm not in the detail of it, then obviously that would be wholly wrong. But I think the issue to do with the ISI is actually a derivative from this broader question, which is what is the real, who's really running the policy in Pakistan, and what is its direction, and do people really believe that in supporting, you know, my enemy's enemy, I'm doing anything other than creating a massive problem for my own country? Because, you know, if the ISI, and obviously these issues to do with the ISI have been around for a long, long time, if they're engaged in any of this activity, in the end, it will not merely have an adverse impact on the Americans or the Afghans or ourselves or yourselves. poisons the atmosphere in Pakistan as well.
I know we're discussing the ISI with a big if.
Yeah, because I really, you know, and it's not...
And you're right as Tony Blair to bring the if into the conversation. But from an Indian standpoint, and I could say fairly accurately from an American standpoint, the if doesn't exist. Yeah. Therefore, do you think these two governments, who must be amongst the two most affected, ought to get together and work out a policy to take action against the ISI?
I mean, for myself, I would say that the single most important thing is to see how we can engage those elements, there are many of them in Pakistan, that do actually believe this is a huge mistake for their country to be engaged.
Within Pakistan?
I think you've got to do that. Now, that's not to say, as in the case of Osama bin Laden, that America, you know, there was never any way they were not going to take out someone who'd killed thousands of their own citizens. So, you know, that is naturally a situation in which America is going to intervene directly. But the best way of doing this is to try to work to allow Pakistan to change and evolve in the way that I know there are a lot of decent people there want it to evolve. And as I say, you know, there's thousands of people who've died in Pakistan as a result of this terrorism. But they've got to get to grips with the roots of this in Pakistani society.
Mr. Blair, let's come now briefly to yourself. Unfortunately, you come to India at a time when British papers like the Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph, the Sunday Times, British television channels like Channel 4 are running stories and documentaries about you. They're suggesting, well, they're talking about what they call the jet-setting billionaire lifestyle he has enjoyed ever since leaving Downing Street in June 2007. And the real point they're making is that the pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
Yeah, I'm afraid what happened in the British media is that it's got an establishment on the left, you know, who didn't like me because I was New Labour, you know, very modern type of Labour Party, and there's an establishment on the right, the Mail and the Telegraph and so on, and they don't like me because I'm Labour and won 3 elections for a Labour Party that never won 2 successive full terms before, and I won 3.
So both lots are picking on you?
And they do. The fact is I probably spend more than 2/3 of my time on pro bono activity. I have, just to explain what I actually do, I spend probably the single biggest chunk of my time is on the Middle East peace process, which I do unpaid. I then have a foundation that's about religious interfaith based here in India, which is why I'm here in India today. I have a foundation that's about Africa governance, where we work in 5 different African countries. I raise money for all those activities, and you know, I employ now, under me, I left office with about 2 people and a mobile phone, but I've now got about 150 people working for me. So if what I was interested in doing was making money, I can make a lot more and have a very gentle and easy life. And when they talk about a jet-set lifestyle, what they actually mean is I spend a lot of time on jets, which is true.
What about the fact, and this is a point that has been made by both the Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph, they allege that you've used the access you have as Middle East envoy for the quartet to actually acquire contracts or business interests in your own personal interest?
Yeah, this is absolutely untrue. And the 2 contracts that they mention are 2 things that I've raised for the Palestinians. One about mobile telephony, because they only had 1 mobile telephone company, and the Palestinians were desperate to introduce competition, which would give them hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. It was the single biggest foreign direct investment in Palestine. I made absolutely no gain out of it at all. It was a long-standing commitment of the international community. And the other thing is a project that hasn't yet come to fruition, which is the gas marine project off Gaza. And the tenure, I mean, I won't get into the detail, but it is such a sort of tenuous way that they try and connect some commercial gain. To me, it's totally absurd. The fact is,
So it's absurd and unfair, these allegations?
Yeah, and untrue, most important of all.
Very quickly, because I don't want to carry on about this for very long, but they talk about 2 specific ones. The fact that you met Colonel Gaddafi 5 or 6 times and promoted, they allege, a banking deal for JP Morgan, for whom separately you happen to be an advisor, and secondly, that you used your access to the Emir of Kuwait to arrange contracts for Tony Blair Associates. Those are 2 charges specifically.
Yeah, and again, just to deal with both of them, actually, I've never in fact made any commercial deals out of Libya at all. It's true I used to see Gaddafi after I left office, particularly for the first couple of years. I was very instrumental in bringing him in from the cold. He gave up his nuclear and chemical weapons, started cooperating in the fight against terrorism. I hoped he might shift internal policy to match external policy shifts, but he didn't. And in respect of Kuwait, this is something I do is completely separate from anything else. I have one part of what we do is we advise governments on building capacity and things like healthcare and education and so on. It's got absolutely nothing to do with what I do in the Middle East. And so, look, in the end, I suppose, as someone said to me the other day, the fact that I'm in the British newspapers so much shows you continue to interest people or divide them one way or another. But, for me, my life is actually is directed towards what I think is the big issue, which is how do you bring about, in an era of globalization, peaceful coexistence. That's why I do the Middle East. That's why I do the religious interfaith. That's why I do this thing about Africa and trying to help countries get their way out of poverty. And for me, the money is just a way of funding the rest of the things I do. So, it's just part of life.
Have these allegations, these accusations upset you?
Well, it's certainly upsetting on the particular thing in relation to Palestinians, because it's just completely untrue. So it's, even me with my broad shoulders and thick skin after all these years, I mean, it's not pleasant to have people say that. But on the other hand, you get, one of the things that my wife always used to say to me when I was in Downing Street, and sometimes, the media would be having a go left and right, clattering in at me, and I'd go up to the flat above Downing Street, because you live above the shop as Prime Minister, and I'd sit down at the kitchen table and, I'd start to whinge a little bit about how unfair everything is, And she used to say to me, stop moaning, it's voluntary, and it's a privilege to do the job. So I kind of think that, all these brickbats that you get, in a way, so what? I feel immensely privileged and immensely blessed to be able to do the things I do. So
when the press go for you, grit your teeth and take it.
Correct. Best idea.
A pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Karen.